Okay, can everyone hear me? Has everyone gotten their coffee and tea? Is everyone back?
Can you make an announcement also, Ne?
Yeah.
Someone.
A public service announcement. There was a pair of black sunglasses left at the registration table this morning. If you have lost a pair of black sunglasses, you can get it from the two gentlemen at the registration table. Okay, great. So welcome back to our second session for the morning. The title of the session is Critical Literacies as a Framework for the Civic University. My name is Amy Durant, and I'll be facilitating. And next to me, I have two of my colleagues, and one of my, I'm not too sure what Noluvo is. I'll just call her a colleague as well. So to my left is Oyama. To Oyama's left is Clifford, and to Clifford's left is Noluvo. So just a slight change to the program. Deidre Geduld won't be here, so Noluvo will be carrying the second session of this time. But yeah, so Oyama and Clifford are both from the Hubs of Convergence and Engagement Office, and Noluvo is representing the Faculty of Education and Examinations. I'll let them share any other important CV points if they'd like to, but I think that they have a rich presentation ahead, so I will hand straight over to them. So Cliff and Oyama will be sharing until 11, and then Noluvo, and then we'll head straight into a combined discussion, so you can just take notes of your questions from the first presentation. Great, all the best.
Wonderful, thank you, Amy. For myself and Oyama, once our presentation pops up, we're going to be speaking about deconstructing dominant narratives as it relates to the conversation around critical sustainable literacies. So, how do we dollar what we must? We are focusing on the hubs of convergence as a model for, firstly, challenging dominant practices and institutional power dynamics, how it can enrich the university community engagement through vernacular approaches, and we'll be breaking down our understanding of vernacular as we go, and how perhaps the hubs of convergence can help us rethink sustainable development goals beyond just profit-driven frameworks. And as we engage, there are some key questions that we would love to dialogue with the audience with. Firstly, what role does vernacularity play in community engagement? And why is it important, if it is important? And how does the hubs of convergence contribute to reshaping sustainable development approaches? Before we get started, there's a QR code. You can take out your phone and you can scan this QR code, and it would take you to a website. And if you could just please do that, we'll give some time for that. Just input some words. What do you understand about community engagement at Mandela University? So when you think of this university, and you think of community engagement, just put in some words. And then for colleagues that don't have their phones, and Diswa and Wensley, if you could just make yourself visible, they will be assisting with inputting the words for you. So you can just give them your words and they will input it. So I'm just going to give like a minute for us to get that exercise going. Thank you. So I'm just giving us time to do that. I'll give us some background music while we do it. Ofeshe, ayakata, 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 arararara, ororororo. That is Fela Anikulapo Kuti, for those of us that don't know. So we can keep typing in as the conversation continues. Okay, we are going to move on. So what we want to do is we want to start with the why for the hubs of convergence. Oftentimes within the university, we are so quick to jump to how is it we want to get this work done? How is it we want to rethink this Civic University? But sometimes we actually need to start with the why. Why do we need a Civic University? And so we use the Hubs of Convergence as an entry point to looking at the why. And those photographs you see over there, these are from our colleague Untombo, sitting in the corner over there, who is able to tell stories of engagement through pictures. And pictures then become a powerful output from our work, and it links to the vernacular. So, what is it we're talking about when we speak about the vernacular context? Well, if you go into academic writing, oftentimes vernacularity would be linked to indigeneity, an indigenous aspect of people's culture or their language, or even as we saw yesterday with the colleagues from architecture presentation. The word Werner was often used to refer to house-born slave. And then the use shifted eventually in Roman use, vernaculus, to mean native. So you can see there was always that indigenous aspect to the use. And then in sociology, often you see me reference sociology because that's a discipline I am in. But in my discipline, sociology, oftentimes when we talk of vernacular, we often speak about it from a class perspective. So almost like the vernacular is a subclass to the main class, you know. For example, let's think of how we dialogue. You know, I'm speaking English now, and sometimes people will say, yeah, but speak in your vernacular language, you know, as almost like that language is subordinate to the English language. So what we're saying then is we're not looking at vernacularity from a class perspective. We're looking at it from a relational perspective. And so there's a Nigerian philosopher, Chukwudi Eze. He speaks about the conceptual everyday and how cultures, systems can be transformed through dialogue. So through this workshop and this Critical Sustainability Literacies workshop, the conversations we've been having actually have the power to change institutional engagement. So it's not just talky-talky, but this talk can actually inform policies. It can actually shape systems. As a model, values the vernacular knowledge, the everyday conversation, wherever it is, whether we have that conversation here at Bird Street, whether we have it at Zwede, whether we have it in the church, whether we have it in the streets of Helenville, that dialogue can shape the way the institution is. And so, this context-dependent framework actually challenges the Western discourse where Western theories claim to be universal. You know, Bongani is not here, breaks my heart, because he was talking about Karl Marx yesterday. And oftentimes in our disciplines, you see they would posit Karl Marx theories and Max Weber as the universal sociology theories. But they're just European sociology theories. Not to say they're irrelevant, but they are context dependent. Because if we come to Africa, there are also theories and there are also knowledges that we can learn from. And so we're coming from a relational standpoint. And then Enver Motala, he was here yesterday, he's not here today. It reminds me of a paper he wrote last year where he challenged scholarship of engagement versus engaged scholarship. And when he spoke about scholarship of engagement, you know, yesterday we had citizen science, science shop, critical participatory action research, you know, there's many names, boy, Tonton, you know. And Enver critiqued many of these theories because we don't go into the epistemological foundations of what informed them, the whys. Because often these theories are built on like charity, that the university is giving charity to communities. They're built on paternal models, on patriarchal models, oftentimes. And so Enver says, on the other hand, engaged scholarship is built from the doing. We are not bringing theories to come and inform how we engage with our communities. How we engage with our communities in our theories on engagement is informed from the work that we have been doing through engaging with the communities. And so the Hubs of Convergence, as I conclude on the why, this model was built from dialogue. It was built from relationality. It started, the catalytic movement was when the Vice Chancellor had this idea to rethink engagement. But it could not become what it is today if she wasn't in dialogue with Prof. Kiet, if she wasn't in dialogue with Bruce Damons, if she wasn't in dialogue with Amy Derat, Oyama, Siskan Yi, Nicole Enver-Motala. And so from those dialogues, this model began to get shaped. And now this model is informing scholarship. And so we are moving from scholarship of engagement towards engaged scholarship. And in conclusion, before I move to Oyama, Mkhize and Nseke explain how this thing within us to look for marginalized knowledge is not a scholarship thing. It's not only related to the university. It's a human thing. You know, their paper they speak about, and pardon my pronunciation, ukuzwa ngekaba, which speaks about the umbilical cord. And in Africa, oftentimes, where your placenta is buried is where you are rooted to, right? And so there's something within us as Africans to always want to go and get that, our knowledge. Where in the university for the longest time, they told us that knowledge was not relevant. But now we're saying, actually it is, because this context we're living in is different from Europe, and we also have knowledge to bring. So now we've looked at the why of the Hubs of Convergence. Let's look at the how, and I'll hand over to Oyama.
Morning, colleagues. Thank you so much, Cliff, for fertilizing the soil for us. So to expand on what Cliff just mentioned was how then HOC connect existing and emerging knowledge as a place and space. So through our programmatic work, it acts as a bridge or a meeting point that integrates existing knowledge with emerging knowledge and insights. Therefore, by doing this, we are then fostering a dynamic space where we have traditional theories and new perspective where they intersect. And by doing this, we then offer a space of bringing together diverse contributors from different disciplines and background, which then enables the exchange and the synthesis of ideas. The convergence also allows established concepts to be revisited and refined, so that we can have innovative approaches and enriched understanding that pushes the boundaries of current thinking. The slide was not on, Cliff.
You did well with the presentation.
Can you
Back to
go
the slide?
Previous slide, thanks. So how does this help us to rethink current development approaches to the SDGs? So when we think about this convergence of existing and emerging knowledges, we have to think around of the concept of helping us rethink current development approaches to the SDGs by advocating and advancing a more holistic and adaptive approach. And how we do this, through our programmatic work, we've learned that integrating new insight, as mentioned before, with established knowledge, we can challenge, conventional methods and address gaps or limitations in current practices. Then this approach also encourages innovative solutions that are more context-specific, inclusive, and responsive to changing global dynamics. And ultimately, for it to support the creation of the new and emerging development strategies that are resilient, equitable, and more effective in achieving SDGs that are context specific. So in doing this work, we also have to, also consider the different approaches and lenses as well. So we are cognizant, when implementing the programmatic work, that we are guided by our own Mandela University Vision 30. We are guided by the 2030 National Development Plan. We are also guided by the African Agenda 2060 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. However, colleagues, we also want to flag, through doing this work and the experience of doing this work, we do have some tensions with some of the mentioned agendas, in particular the 2030 SDGs. However, we've learned to live in these tensions because we believe we have to be part of the conversation that influence and change the narrative to be context-specific, especially for the African continent. As our ZEF leader, Secretary Umelumzi, mentioned that yesterday, as much as we are faced with unemployment, but the burning issue and the urgency in their community for them is hunger, and how they immediately respond to that. As much, some may argue that maybe unemployment and hunger, they go together, but what is the urgency in the community for them? What is the priority for them? We can talk unemployment for them, but there's something else that is emerging on the ground. Hence, it was mentioned yesterday, our ears have to be at ground root level so that we can feel the vibrations of the communities and challenges that they face. With that, Cliff, we can move to the next slide.
And just also on this slide, you see that there are 8 thematic hubs in the Hubs of Convergence. And under those 8 thematic hubs, there are over 40 projects that are happening. And you see how these projects, they respond. They respond to the institutional strategy. They respond to the provincial and national strategy, the African agenda strategy, and of course the global, the SDGs. But at the same time, they're not just responding, but they're informing. So we're saying, yes, we are guided by this, but actually our work can help rethink even the SDGs and how we position our work over there. And then when we look at critical sustainable literacies, what can we learn from the way the Hubs of Convergence positions its work? Well, we say by centering local knowledges and the vernacular experience, the Hubs of Convergence addresses and challenges unequal power balances, often prevalent in institutional engagement practices. The inter, multi, and transdisciplinary nature, as well as transversal, the work is not only done within disciplines, it's done within the university, outside the university, in communities. Can help address SDG 4, which focuses on quality education, because we need to start thinking education outside of these formal institutions. The Hubs of Convergence helps us rethink what the university is good for, a conversation that came out a lot yesterday. through its emphasis on the importance of civic engagement and multi-stakeholder collaboration. And as a university, we are aiming for student access for success. And the Hubs of Convergence integrates students within the work by getting them involved in civic engagement. But then, we must be critical of ourselves and say, we speak about student access for success. It's our language, right? It features in the university a lot. But then, why do we have student protests at the beginning of every single year? Those are newspaper articles from 2021, 2022, 2024. I mean, we can go all the way back to when I was a student, And even as we're sitting down here, we know very much that come February next year, there will be protests. And we would not be able to have academic activities probably for February, March, maybe into April. So we are aware of this. But why does this keep prevailing over and over again? That's a good point, Jenny, NSFAS, but also, we must be critical of ourselves. How are we as a Mandela University even, what power balances, what inequality are prevalent within our praxis that we can engage in?
Thanks, Cliff. Like you've mentioned, and also to stress as well that it cannot be, when it comes to this business as usual, as we know, every year, the first quarter of the university, to a certain extent, the operations are halted due to the student protests. But for us is, what is it that we are not hearing and listening to concerning the cries of students at this university? And what are the meaningful mechanisms are we developing at this point in time currently to respond positively, to support a student access for success? And when I was thinking about this as well, I'm like, we need to not be tone deaf when it comes to these societal issues and concerns. And engagement and transformation, therefore, needs to be pushed beyond boundaries and comfort zones to meaningfully address and respond to these issues. And through our work, and visit to George campus last week, we learned that actually we are discovering and learning about soft, robust engagement. And why soft? The aim is not for us to hurt one another in doing these deliberations and engagement with students, and also with staff, and also with our leadership. But how do we constructively and critically engage for the betterment, not only for the students and learners, but for society at large? Like Cliff mentioned, that it has been happening, but what needs to change now? Because I have a tension every time, my line manager would ask me towards end of February, you need to be busy with a quarterly report. I always am like, but Njani, the first quarter, it like, some are able to do their work, but there's some restrictions and activities that affect us to actually doing the work. But you then expect that a quarterly report must be written. How? And I'm not asking this like Ingati, there's a problem, but like, how are we thinking in a way that is positively responding in trying to address this issue? Because we can, for example, Jenny say it's NSFAS, but when you go back and look at that picture in Herald, in all the newspapers, it's not saying NSFAS. Mandela University, it affects you. So how do you re-engage all stakeholders that are involved in this process, so that when we come next year, at least at least there's better engagement with our students to avoid this. Because I'm telling you now, as we're sitting here, already students are planning even how they can respond or make themselves sort of like feel not comfortable, but prepare for them. Okay, we know they're gonna call the police, we're not gonna have food. They're busy mobilizing. What is the university doing in this time to respond to that, so that at least 2025, there's something different? You know, Amy's staring at me, I'm guessing it's time up.
Is it time?
Thanks.
Okay. And just, yeah. And you know, it's you hear Oyama speak, you hear me speak, and remember again what Enver said about engaged scholarship. We speaking because we're on the ground. We do this work. We're in the communities. We engaging with the various stakeholder communities. And if I write about this, if I speak about this, I'm speaking from the vernacular. I'm speaking from my conceptual everyday. This is my lived reality. You know, I'm not sitting in an office separate from the ground, and then I write a policy about it. No, I am engaging. But then Oyama spoke about the place and space for the Hubs of Convergence. And what we say is the place is the physical entity. It's like this building, you know. And also, but the space is the unseen, which is the value-driven, which is the how we create an atmosphere for dialogue. And that's the importance of conversation, because even from this engagement, we want to hear from you, because that would also inform the way that the Hubs of Convergence is conceptualized. So it's not a static thing. It's alive. It's a living entity. I like to see it like that. And it's agile. I mean, Bruce spoke yesterday about how, or Toswana mentioned, we were in Stellenbosch, and a colleague flagged that why is there no homeless people among our stakeholder communities? And none of us had seen this before. And this colleague was someone who had previously been homeless and is white, which also just breaks many sociological stereotypes, right? But then this is something that we've been speaking about now in our conceptualization of our different models of hubs of convergence. So that's how this thing is agile for us. But the places could be, you can see there, we could be in a farm, in a school, we could be in a garden, we could be in a building, we could have the VC dancing with community members on the stage. You know, Bruce often says, how can you lead me if you cannot dance with me? You know, there's me and Bruce in Girona, Spain, funded by this grant also, where we went to engage globally with some other colleagues doing this kind of work. And that's us on top of a staircase, and Bruce giving me an action learning lecture where I genuinely think he just needed a break from climbing the staircase, and just created a whole story as to how we can engage. There is us also, as part of this grant, online, there's my computer screen, engaging with colleagues from across the world. Maura, you saw yesterday, from the University of Limerick, actually facilitating a module on community engagement. So you can see the places and spaces are dynamic. We can even have it in the forest, as we learned yesterday. The key is we must be agile. We must be willing to wander, you know? And so, just to conclude, let's look at some of the words that came from your when I asked. Oh, is it not showing? Okay, let's try again. Oh, I think I have to stop presenting this side and show. I'd already done this whole technology thing, you know. There we go. But I like it, Bruce, agile. So these are some of the words that came from the audience here. You know, when we look at Mandela University, I say the strongest word there is collaboration. we see communities, we see underfunded. We see hubs of convergence, we see help, we see building. You can see all the words there. So when we discuss later, I would like to invite us to remember these words. Now you've heard from the senior manager of the Hubs of Convergence, from the resource mobilizer in the engagement office. How can we rethink institutional engagement with some of the words you provided here, so that that model that we said is a living entity can actually even move to respond to some of the challenges we face today? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Cliff and Oyama. We are going to head straight into the next presentation by Noluvo. So if I can just ask that any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, critiques, you just write them down so that you don't forget them. And then once Noluvo is done, we'll take questions for both. And even to encourage you, even if you have questions from yesterday's presentations or thoughts, because hopefully you are seeing the connections, write those down and then we can have the discussion afterwards. So Noluvo, over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Noluvo Khangana. I will be presenting on behalf of myself and Professor Gedald, who sincerely apologized. She could not be with us today. And I pressed something wrong there. And basically this morning, I'll be talking about multiple perspectives and inclusivity. And basically, critical literacy requires an understanding of multiple perspectives. And the Nelson Mandela University can lead this by actually ensuring that marginalized voices are central to the knowledge production process. And so the Hubs of Convergence model that was just presented now by the senior manager, it already reflects this through their approach, through their participatory approach, and in the manner in which they conduct their community engagements, and also in the manner in which they collaborate with their various stakeholders. However, this framework can be strengthened through the African episteme, and I think that is basically why I am sitting here today. So looking at the African lens, we do know that the African content is actually part of the global south, and therefore we have our own cultures, we reach in our own histories and the way in which we do things. We are governed by the philosophies that are underpinned in the African context. And I have there one of those philosophies, which is Ubuntu, I am because you are. And basically this philosophy, it puts emphasis on the importance of humanity. And in fact, amongst the African people, there is no worse ignominy than to be characterized as a non-human. When someone is saying that to you, that is you being downgraded to a status of a non-human being. And also, we are guided by a philosophy that Dr. Dammons and myself and Professor Gedald came across when we were in Kenya, Harambee. And I believe that this philosophy, it actually embodies inclusivity in itself. And it also carries with it reciprocity, and it acknowledges the multiple perspectives that do exist within the African context. And so bringing an African episteme in the conversation, it mandates us to actually be intentional in how we ensure marginalized voices are central to the knowledge production process. And so to guide us in this process, we propose the use of the African Calabash framework to provide guidance in terms of how do we go about this? How do we ensure that marginalized voices are actually central to the process of knowledge making? And so this framework, it serves as a blueprint to guide the engagement process. And also, it's deeply rooted in African philosophy, like I said, Ubuntu, Harambe, and it encourages the community to engage, not only to engage, but to do so in a collaborative contemplation that fosters unity and convergence in their collective response to various challenges from both the past and the present. And so this calabash vessel is historically used throughout the African continent, and it represents community, it represents interconnectedness, it represents unity. And its philosophy, as I mentioned, closely aligns with the philosophy of Harambe, the philosophy of Ubuntu, and it emphasizes a collective effort and communal collaboration to address societal challenges. And so the fusion of the African calabash philosophy, Harambe and Ubuntu, it forms a culturally resonant framework that guides the African epistemic engagement process, which in turn promotes unity, collaboration, adaptability for positive and sustainable change. And so this is the framework that we're proposing that guides the engagement process and that guides the process of ensuring that marginalized voices are actually central to the process of knowledge making. And going through the actual structure, just a side note, I was talking to someone about this model and they listened to me for a good 10 minutes and then they said, why a calabash? Why not a drum? If we're talking about African, there are many artifacts that represent us as African people. So why a calabash? And I'll explain that in a short while. The first part there is a pattern that is in black and white, umbhaco. We recognize that umbhaco. The Amaxhosa tribe, we wear that when we are celebrating, when we are at imigidi. And that basically represents the African identity. That is to say, first and foremost, we must celebrate our identity and we must acknowledge our Africanness into the conversation. And the second section, the Anyansapo knots that are used in the Ghanaian context, which represents wisdom. When we are talking about ensuring that marginalized voices are central to the process of knowledge making, we must understand and appreciate the different knowledges that they bring into the space. And therefore, we must position them as reservoirs of knowledge, as a man's, when we are actually partaking in this process. And then the third section there is the African drum to say we need to be culturally intelligent if we are talking about acknowledging and appreciating multiple perspectives. Therefore, we need to be in sync and we need to be culturally intelligent in the spaces within which we find ourselves. And then the diamond-shaped holding hands there, it basically signifies that we need to be coherent as well in terms of how we converse with each other. And the black there signifies the strength that we have together, and the red signifies we cannot engage if we do not have love for the people. The third aspect there, the bubble, that bubble brings to the conversation language. How language is important in terms of us navigating the space, in terms of us appreciating multiple perspectives and trying to bring inclusivity in the table. We need to be cognizant of language and how language is never neutral and how language carries a potential of silencing voices. And so in the spaces within which we find ourselves, we need to be cognizant of language. Then the fourth section there is a guide in terms of how do we then navigate this process, and that approach is the same approach that is used at the engagement office, the participatory approach, to say we must also acknowledge the situatedness of people. We must be aware of the environmental challenges. We must be aware of the socio-political atmosphere or climate within which we find ourselves in. And also in the process of that, we need to empower one another. We need to learn from and with each other. And also we need to be able to understand and appreciate vulnerability as an important aspect in terms of how we engage with each other. And the last section there brings about when now all is done, that is a basket weaving of black and white that represents fruitfulness in terms of how we engage and navigate in the space. And so, to add on the why a calabash question, if you look at the structure, it's cyclic. It represents an unending conversation. It never ends. It's an ongoing conversation. And therefore, the cyclic structure is representative of that. And then a calabash is fragile. Once you drop it, it breaks. And the fragility there, it represents vulnerability. We must not be afraid to be vulnerable in the spaces within which we find ourselves. And I heard yesterday Prof. Goliath, when she was commenting on one of the lecturers, I think architecture, and she voiced out and she appreciated the fact that the lecturer showed humanness when he said, "I'm nervous." And he was able to say that in front of his students. And so we must never be afraid to be vulnerable in the spaces within which we find ourselves in, because that in turn also ends up showing the people that we are working with that we are authentic in the process. And the vessel itself, the calabash in the African context, it's mostly used to store milk. And we know milk nurtures. From the baby, you drink milk. And so the whole process of acknowledging multiple perspectives and inclusivity is a nurturing process. And so the vessel itself, it represents even how the milk is stored in the calabash as well. And also the calabash, when it's being used in the African context, it gets passed around. People gather around to drink from the same calabash. And what is important there, that act of coming together to drink from that same calabash, that in itself represents the African identity. That in itself represents culture. It signifies oneness, it signifies inclusivity, and it signifies reciprocity. And so when we're talking about multiple perspectives and inclusivity, I have the value of that. And basically, it is to know that when you're engaging with individuals that are from different, diverse backgrounds, that have different perspectives, that have different lived experiences, that collective insight, it broadens and it provides a richer foundation for creative problem solving in whichever societal challenge that you're working towards solving. And also those various perspectives, they allow for a more comprehensive approach in terms of the challenges, and it also fosters innovative solutions in how we can go about problem solving that challenge. And also what is important there, a mixture of ideas and insights and personal experiences. These, in turn, result in the people working together being better positioned to actually evaluate even the societal challenges that they are dealing with. And also, this allows them to increase their adaptability and resilience in terms of changing their environment. And also, lastly there, in terms of incorporating the multiple perspectives, that facilitates critical thinking as well in the space, as individuals must evaluate and integrate their different viewpoints that differ from their own perspectives. Then when we talk about inclusivity, this fosters a sense of belonging even amongst the people that are working together, and it has been linked to higher levels of engagement. It encourages open communication, authentic communication where trust is built, and also the different viewpoints, they allow individuals from different backgrounds to actually share their unique insights without fear of being judged. And this integration, it allows and actually is important to achieve meaningful, and not just solutions, but meaningful solutions and innovative solutions towards the societal challenges. And also to note that the diverse perspectives, they allow people to approach various problems creatively as well, whilst inclusivity fosters a culture of respect, a culture of trust, empowering individuals to contribute authentically. Contextualizing critical literacies in our space at Nelson Mandela University, I have the learning and teaching, research and engagement, and this is just to show how we have applied the acknowledgement of multiple perspectives in our own spaces within which we find ourselves in. The Hubs of Convergence every year, in a module that Professor and myself teach, we invite the Hubs of Convergence to speak to our final year students in terms of the work that they do and also how the students can also form part of the work that they do. And we do this through community action projects. And this is our way of aligning the curriculum to speak to the realities of our societies. And so students, I have their various projects that they do. But what is different about this is how these projects are conceptualized. They don't decide that we want to do a project where we do donations, for an example. No, they go into the communities. With the communities, they establish the various challenges that the communities face. And collaboratively then, they find a solution in terms of how they can work together in addressing that particular challenge. And so that's the power of these projects. That's why we name them community action projects. And you see the various projects there. There's actually one that is not showing there, but they went to an old age home, and when they got there, they had a conversation with the managers of the old age home and the grandmothers and grandfathers that were staying there to find out how can we be of service to society. And when they got there, they actually found out that all they need is pampering. And there's a picture there that is not showing now where the grandmothers, they were having their hair done. The grandfathers, they were having their beard trimmed and, they were having nail polish, and they spent the entire day doing that. And that was meaningful because that is what they needed. But throughout the day, they discovered through conversations that they would actually love to have a garden. And so that then made them to come the next day to plant a garden. They didn't go there to say, we are going to plant the garden for you. But that conversation came. So that's the power of these projects. They go into the communities. They establish with the communities what the communities need. The picture there, there's a green dome there. Those students, they were doing their practicals at that school the previous year. So when this came about, they then remembered that that particular school used to complain about the fact that there were bottles that were broken around the school because there's a nearby tavern. So they went back to that school to in trying to assist with their challenges. They discovered that through conversations that problem still persists, and that is very dangerous because now the learners also get affected in terms of the broken bottles and everything. So together they collaboratively came up with an idea to have that green dome. So they wrote to relevant people and they managed to source that green dome for the school. But then because they were also in talks with the community members also saw that as a way whereby they can keep their environment clean, because then they would also put bottles, instead of throwing them away, they would put the bottles there. Not only was the school cleaner now, but they entered that school in a recycling competition and the school got funding, they got finances. And so they were able to get funding for the school, and they were also able to work with the community in terms of cleaning the broken glass. And so those are the kinds of projects that our students are doing. That's a newspaper article that came out, I think 2 months ago, where our students, when they established the needs of that particular school and the community, the challenge there was sign language and the fact that no one really knows sign language. So they went to learn sign language because themselves, they didn't know sign language. So they had to capacitate themselves so that they're able to teach the school children and the community members sign language. So those are some of the projects that our students are doing. And the kind of students that we are training are students that are able to think about the community, are students that are able to sit around the table with the community members and understand what the societal needs are. In terms of research, We need to be able to conduct research that fosters social change. We must shy away from doing research for the sake of research and graduating, but the research actually has to have a meaningful contribution to society. And for us to be those type of researchers, we need to understand that we must learn from the people that we are researching with. So we must move away from coming into the space as the all-knowers. We must move away from coming to the space as knowing that our knowledge is valid and, and that's all there is. And the picture there is an example of that, where I came into the space as a researcher. However, I was being taught by one of the participants of the study of a way to analyze data, which I didn't know. So I opened myself in the space to be taught. And also in the process of this research, I had to negotiate even the research questions with the people that I was researching with. And so to have researchers that have that understanding that you're not doing research on people, but you're doing research with people, is another way that we can foster inclusivity in the space. Then we have the engagement, which speaks about critical community-based engagement, where we say this is not just an approach to scholarship, but it represents a form of understanding, and it promotes the epistemological questions such as, what is knowledge? How is knowledge assessed? What defines valid knowledge? And how do we come to know what we know? So it is not about sustaining the status quo in community, political, and socio-economic structures, but it is a radical agenda that is committed to get to the root of power inequality and oppression through critical engagement. And these are just some of the challenges that we earmarked in terms of implementing inclusivity and appreciating multiple perspectives. One, there is resistance to diversity. And when people are resistant to diversity, they're not able to allow and see the value in terms of multiple perspectives. And I have there again language and cultural barriers, which we must not shy away from, and the limited awareness of inclusivity's benefits and how that can hinder progress if that is not being enforced and fostered with. And then I have there, for instance, cultural misunderstandings. They may rise when people from different backgrounds interpret communication cues differently, which might lead to potential conflicts. And so in conclusion, through critical literacies, we gain the ability to understand and analyze the socio-political systems that shape our lives, enabling us to question these structures. Beyond this, critical literacies, they empower us to challenge oppressive systems that position certain individuals as sole custodians of knowledge while amplifying the richness of diverse perspectives. And lastly, an African episteme compels us to explore the relationship between language and power, highlighting its potential to silence marginalized voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Noluvo. So we have got just over half an hour where we can engage with these three colleagues. So if you can pull out your questions and thoughts from the session with Oyama and Cliff, or if you have any questions or thoughts from Noluvo's presentation, or from all the presentations before that, going back to yesterday morning. So Sylvia, I see a hand there. Bruce, two more at the back. Okay, let's start with those, 5 questions. Let's see if we can get through all 5 of those questions. Okay.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for the presentation. I think it was very insightful, triggered a lot of thought in me. I have probably 2 comments. It may come out as a question eventually. The first speaks to the aspect around the student protests, and I think the presenters were quite passionate about the issue and what it surfaces for us. I recall some time ago just reflecting on the Fees Must Fall movement and a colleague asking me, what will it take for us to actually address this persistent issue? And I then reflected on some of my own personal experiences, having participated in Fees Must Fall myself, and wondered what actually encouraged me to participate. And it's when it actually affected me personally. So when the pinch of that fee increment got to such a point that personally it affected me, that's when I actually started to participate. So I'm not sure where we are in terms of, this persistent issue. Are we really waiting for it to affect all of us personally, for us to be really invested in finding a workable solution? And I think these types of issues manifest in similar ways, but also different ways for different institutions of higher learning. Different students are enrolled and have varying challenges, and the level at which we see uprising differs across different universities based on the students and the lived realities that they are faced with. That's probably a comment. Then the second thing that I wanted to comment on, and I think this would actually be framed as a question, is the aspect around collaboration and working together. I think in the past 2 days, I've heard the term collaboration come up quite a bit, and we really are striving towards collaborating, but how much are we reflecting on how difficult it is to collaborate? We really do want to collaborate, we want to work together, but there are competing interests, and different entities need to achieve different things through the projects that they conceptualize and eventually implement. And I think the economic realities nowadays show us that we don't all have the resources that we need in order to implement particular projects. So we're somewhat forced to collaborate, but how much are we really reflecting on how difficult it is to come together with our competing interests and our competing deliverables to come together in one space and actually collaborate?
Thanks, Chairperson. So I would suggest first that we all have a generational responsibility to respond to historical and contemporary challenges that are besetting our country, the continent, and the globe. When I was led by Mike Pansy many moons ago in PE, when they were organizing us as civil society around consumer boycotts and marches, Mike Pansy had a generational responsibility then, I would suggest, Mike. The question and the tension I'm sitting is around first Oyama's statement that sitting in management, because she's the senior manager, and the example of the institutional response. I don't think we can change anything in our lifetime. I'm past that stage because I'm balding very quickly, like my father. But I think we can still make a meaningful contribution. And the tension is all, what contribution can we make in this lifetime? And I go back to the example Oyama gave in George, because when you sit there as a director and you have a black student, and I emphasize black, all black students, having to prepare for the final exam of his life, having the whole village cliff wanting, excited. And this is the leader's reflection as he's trying to think with us how to plan the George Hubs of Convergence. So we do our check-in and we ask him, how are you feeling? He says, I'm tense. I'm finished because it's this time of the year, and I'm anxious because of the exam. And this black student says, I said, but go study. He said, I'm not tense about that. I'm tense about those students that are going to come and roll on our campus, are going to come with the suitcases, and are going to be put on the street. And then Cliff, in true vernacular of the student, it triggers another Jasmine that is dealing with end-period poverty. And she says, oh, I forgot, we will have to get sanitary pads as well. And they're preparing for the final exam. And we come then as the engagement officer and you senior manager with your Hubs of Convergence. And we tell him, let's start thinking about next year. I believe and I fully support generational struggles. It will be fought in different ways. And I think my generation has to stand up more affirmatively because some of the chaos we experience is now caused by us, have been caused and are still perpetuated by us. But we're still alive, Mike. I blame Mike also because of some of these other tontons. But we're still alive. Myself and Mike have agreement on this. So my question is to the Hubs of Convergence. Beyond feeling anger and solidarity and pictures of protest, what is your contribution to mitigation, the anxieties of the Black African child? When I say Black African child, I'm being deliberate. Because these are the majority of marginalized youth that are on our campuses as well. And they are increasing. But what are you doing? While we have management having to negotiate quite complex things, because it's not as simple sometimes, and thank God I'm not in that level of leadership. But what are you doing where you are located? Are you eager to publish your paper on the HOC? Or are you going to drive processes that can assist not only the students, but the institution in mitigating this generational tension? My second one is to Dr. Rangana. You come with your nice theories here of change and complexities, but I'm a botany student trying to understand how to decolonize my beans in ways. Planted in the calabash, I think that's one solution. And I have never been exposed to these type of epistemic processes, but I want to bring the gift of my science to it. How do you help me? Do you just assume I must be able to do this organically with you? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, guys. Ndizawuqhuba lawo yazolo ke oyama ndiyazi uphambili. I think first and foremost, let us acknowledge as with the community the engagement office which is led by Oyama, Wesley, Andiswa, Ndombo, and Mr. Proust and Cliff, not forgetting you, Amy, because if it was not for you guys, most of the organization, in particular here in the metro, were never going to be exposed on the challenges that are happening on the ground. The second part here is that I'm worried because the issue of NSFAS really is affecting us all. As I'm sitting here, when we had students that were attached to us as with the development of social workers, we engaged them. They also had a problem with NSFAS. Remember, how come you allocate the money around April, but the study starts at 4 February? Balalapha babantu, batyanduna babantu. Then I believe the only answer is within the politicians. What we can do here, I'm challenging us, guys, to say in the next month, going to December, through you, man, Mr. Damons, let's call, even if it's Blade Monday, to one of the workshops together with the student and all of us. where we'll say to them, look, this thing has been happening each and every year. Then for us to stop this thing, we need to say, you allocate the money by January so that the landlords and also the students can have indawo zolala nokutya. Because you cannot go to class with an empty stomach. You know, that is one of the comments that I believe if you can do that, we can be able to solve the problem of our brothers and sisters. Because we talk about the future of South Africa. How can we talk about the future of South Africa, but we are also abantu abayibulalayo, the same future we want for our country? On that note, thank you, Chief. Yeah.
Ndenza ngakwazi nothetha anymore, thetha 20. Oyama, yo, xolo man. Why me ngokuphakama? Okay, now I was gonna talk about the issue. Sisi spoke about humanity. I was wondering, ngabe isekhona into ekuthiwa humanity iyafada iyaphela slowly but surely. What is it that we can do ukuthi sibuyele embo, sibuyele back kula xesha lakudala? Because I don't know whether it is associated londo ne culture that we are no longer singabantu abane humanity. Because bendihleli no Sylvia the last time, CCT as ZDF, we are doing this because sibona umuntu omnyama on the ground, yabo, and we are not getting anything out of this. But then comes my child. Hey, what you are doing? I funding tina silambile, tina sityi ngale nto yenzayo. We are not getting anything out of what you are doing. Yabo? So I feel like currently, okanye generation of today is focused more on immaterials. Yabo? It's like a competition in communities. How then are we sibuyisa back njani humanity back to people so that they can love each other, okanye love the person next to him or her? And another question, man, sis wam, yabo? And okwesibini, kule ndayithethayo story regarding the students. We had students 10-week program. They assisted a don't when I talk those students. We went to high schools. Some of our children, students, they don't get information. They didn't know that NSFAS was open. So these students, they opened their laptops, bancedisa in getting abantwana apply for ulantuka, NSFAS. And then they even informed them about registration universities, but apply abantwana. So information going down to communities is very important esuka from university. So I think ibalulekile that as we're saying that, how do we get university closer to to communities? Mhlambi that can assist as well. For example, I sent Oyam to the river. It's a sewerage, that area. Since I was born, it's even a child is walking on a sewerage, cooler like that, a Soweto. I said to Oyama, hey, if we can bring those engineering department students, maybe they can think of something in that area. How can we deal with this situation in a way? Because umasipala wethu is doing nothing to assist abantu abalawi. So I'm saying, let's try, man, to do that. Yeah, thanks.
I think it's kind of difficult to follow after my two previous talkers, because I think most of the things that they spoke about and the questions that they posed really are, for some of us, a mandate for the lifestyle that we are living. It's what we are doing. It's because we know about the communities that we are coming from. I include myself. So, and again, I want to say thank you to the three speakers for really tying in the 2 days of this Critical Sustainability Literacies workshop. For me personally, okay, this is not a question, it's just a comment. So before Niba Nevas, it's just a comment. And a critique also, ne? And a compliment, actually, it's a 3-in-1. So before I start with my comment, I want to first define what sustainability is for me. For me, sustainability is the practice of meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So when I look at sustainability, or what a sustainable society is, which for me is a lifestyle that involves sustainable methods, what do I mean when I say I am being sustainable? What am I doing now that the future generations can look back and say, oh, you know what, Umnotho actually did something and I'm benefiting from that now. The lady next to me here from Stellies notified me that I've got a FISMAS 4 colleague sitting right across me. So I would like to believe that the students of today in higher education, we played a role for them to be here. So you are sitting here and you're like, we are all playing this role. We all had a part to play on how sustainability is now mentioned today. But again, I cannot help but sit here and be excited about where the academy and research is heading. The past 2 days have really cemented the importance of marrying the stoic academy to the vibrant engagement model. This change, however, and although slow, is there, and that is what I am appreciative of today. I hope that all the emerging researchers in this room can tie in the saying that I mentioned yesterday, during yesterday's workshop by Sir Isaac Newton, to say, the reason why I see further, it is because I am standing upon the shoulders of shoulders amahlombe of giants. We, as emerging researchers, we are because you were. We are because you are. Which is really the premise of Harambe. It is the premise. So I'm literally sitting here and I'm tying everything in between to say, no one or no industry can really be working in silo. We need each other. And if we go back to our African roots and understanding and our knowledge, I think we can really go far. So thank you so much for really reiterating that what we are doing is good, the lifestyle that we are living is good, and the legacies that we are leaving behind are valid. So thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. I want to speak to Cliff and Oyama with their presentation about protests at the beginning of the year. And following the previous colleague's comment, although a 3-in-1, I want to speak about what we do in social psychology. It's a term called social loafing, that there's a reduction in motivation and efforts when people work in a team compared to when they work individually. So that we need to start looking into that social loafing. How much do we take away from one another when we work together? Because we all want to be individuals and we all want to be seen in a situation. The thing of counterfactual thinking as well. We must stop thinking about what could have happened or what could happen in the future when we're speaking about the protest, but what is actually happening. A lot of the first things that we think about is finance, accommodation, and NSFAS when it comes to the fees must fall and these protests at the beginning of the year. But as a mentor back in my undergrad, I it was always the thing of finance. And when we had to sit down and plan our orientation week, we had to look at students that did not know how to flush a toilet. Students that comes from villages that didn't know how to use the facilities in the residences. So we had to take one full day to take all students around the building, showing them how to open the showers, showing them how to use the sanitary bins for the girls, showing them how to use the toilet, because we had to recognize that these students are not all from the city. Some of them are using pit toilets back home. Some of them have to use other means and ways around their life circumstances that now everything suddenly changes. So it's not only the anxiety of money and having to adjust to a new way of living, but it's the anxiety of not even knowing how to navigate that space. So we need to start looking at those things. I feel if the VC can't stand in a shower, why must the student stand in that shower? Look at our on-campus residences. It is extremely dirty. There are rats and cockroaches running around like they live there. There are human beings living there. And our leadership, when last were they in that buildings? When last were those buildings maintained? Yes, the university are putting things in place, but it's happening too slowly. And that is making us upset. It's making us angry at the beginning of the year, because we are not only here to study, we are also here to make a difference for our generation and our people that are coming. Because I'm a young colored boy from Arcadia. I'm sitting in this room and I need to know that I'm not just Wensley Jackson. I represent hundreds and millions of people that are back home, and I need to be that voice for them. So the university needs to start being vulnerable with the students. Stop only communicating and sending out emails and sending out bodyguards when students are burning tires. Be vulnerable from the get-go. When students arrive, tell them what is in for them. Tell them that this is the processes that NSFAS takes, and that you play a role in this process, but it is entirely up to NSFAS and how fast they are going to track their payments to you. We need that communication from our Vice-Chancellor. We need that communication from the top management in the university. We don't want that communication from marketing and comms. Because that is the first thing that we see, that communication is sent from marketing and comms, because it is the communication we receive every single year. We need different communication. We need our leadership to be open to us and say, look, this is what is happening. Because there are new students coming in, they are scared. They are scared, they don't have money. Parents has made loans for their students to get to PE, and then they have to sit here hungry. Think about a parent. Sometimes they always want to think about themselves as the hero. They are not vulnerable to their kids. And that is why we demand certain things from our parents, because we don't know how much salary they earn. We don't know what they cannot do, because they constantly want to show up for us and make everything better than what they have received. And that is what the institution need to do. Stop wanting to make it better for the students, but saying the same struggles you have, I had, and I'm still trying to challenge that system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and comments. I just have one question from online that I'll read, and then you guys have the floor. So this is a question from Joe. He doesn't direct it to anyone specific, so anyone can take it. So Joe says, the Hubs of Convergence is one of the best things to come out of Mandela University. I'm wondering if there are any new or different forms of organization or tools that have come up within communities on the one hand, and the university on the other hand, as a result of the HOC interactions. In other words, what practical new realities can be observed from within the communities and the way the university works as a result of this symbiotic relationship? So there are a lot of questions and comments. I won't even direct how you can do that. So whoever would like to start can start. And we are short on time because a few colleagues have to head back to the airport. So as Cliff reminded us yesterday, even though this session will formally conclude at 12, please continue the conversations at lunch, which is happening straight after this, I believe. Yeah, so...
Yeah, let me just say this now. So we're going to just shift the program. So at 12 we'll have a 15-minute time for tea, because like muffins and fruit have actually arrived. And then at 1:15 we'll come back for the final session of the day, which will end at 1:15. And then hopefully lunch will be here by then, and we'll have lunch and basically then everyone can stay or go as they feel free. So we'll end at 1:15 instead of 2:15. Thanks very much.
Okay, over to the three of you. You have about 3 minutes each. I'm so sorry.
Thanks, Amy. Whew, I'm nervous. Sylvia, on your comment, on how we reflect on the challenge of of collaboration, I think with the Hubs of Convergence work, is because most of the time we engage in practical work, and because of that, every day there's something new. Our work is not monotonous. Therefore, every time we have to find what speaks to a certain context. And we have learned now that our work is not linear, and it's complex, and it needs complex solutions. And in doing that, when we collaborate, you remember we talk about reciprocity. Hence, we always, when we even start engaging, we have that strategic workshop so that we put the cards on the table, so that we know very well what each person wants out of this collaboration. And also what I love about the way that we work with our stakeholders, that, listen, at the end of the day, we can come to a point where, okay, we're not finding consensus, and that's okay. That's okay. And that's sometimes something that we have to live with, or we have to pause and then re-engage again if it gets heated. So that's the complexity of collaboration, and in whatever space you engage in, there will always be something different that emerges. So you can't take the same tone or the same response to a different challenge. And we always have to consider one another's outputs from that possible collaboration. I'm going to allow Cliff to respond to some questions, but to respond to Bruce, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm emotional about things, yes. But I'm catching myself within the emotion. I've moved past that, hence, one, I was intentional. Ask Cliff. I was intentional about putting that there. Because we need to use our spaces. If you remember, I said we need to be part of the conversation, even though it makes me uncomfortable. My job or purpose here is not about me and my own discomfort or angriness. What is it that I am doing now? I was embarrassed myself when we were engaging with students. If I could and my mother was there, I would hide under her dress. That's how embarrassing it was, because I was once one of those students. So what are we going to do moving forward with the HOC limited budget, by the way? We have already planned a strategic workshop with students, with colleagues from George campus, and also with SHOC. We are going to engage, and this is going to, Bruce, influence the strategic plan for 2025. And we are going to take those submissions forward for our seniors to consider and hopefully approved, in trying to have plans in place already when they are thinking as well how to respond to the question. So ours now at this point, in your little corner, what is it that you are doing rather than being angry and being emotional? Yes, being emotional so that you can keep the fire burning. But how do we move forward from the situation? Lastly, we have gotten to a point where even sometimes, I was having a conversation with my husband, and he's saying that I'm listening, but I'm not hearing you. It's one of the things that we're planning to do, Bruce, as HOC, that we want to listen and hear. And if you're not hearing correctly, we need to ask so that we hear fully and then have clarity, clarify one another, so that we have at least the base of understanding moving forward when we respond. We can't be aloof as leadership. We can't. And noting, also we can't
you
be
must hear me. You're
tone-
not hearing
tone-
me.
tone deaf.
You cannot be. Sorry,
Sure.
colleagues. You cannot be a contradiction of your philosophy, Oyama. We must be agile. I have to leave, colleagues. I have to drop people off at the airport. So I'm just going to quickly give my comment and create an apology because I would have to step out of the panel. I'm wearing double hats. I'm also a chauffeur. But it's good, Oyama. I like it. And colleagues, this is how it is. We engage, we're critical. That's the whole point of it. We have to be critical. But just to quickly give my contributions to some of the conversations, with regards to the student protests, we definitely have a responsibility. And I think I always say agency is important. Agency, what do you choose to do? We were intentional with putting those slides up there. It was an intentional act to create this dialogue that is happening and also to shine light on something. And so that's even a way we showed our agency. If you can put back that slide, just to say, a lot of the answers to most of the questions you already put up there. You know, Oyama spoke about complexity. Someone already typed it up there. You spoke about the need for collaboration. Someone put it up there. Before Noluvo did a presentation on inclusivity, someone already put inclusivity up there. So actually, we know these things. We have the languages. The key then is, how do we make this alive? And so, how can we bring these theories to sciences? Oh, that's going to be for Noluvo. Just quickly going to respond to Joe, saying the HOC is one of the best things to come out of Mandela. What new things have come out of the HOC? Well, even this year alone, there's been more than about 10 new projects happening. And what's beautiful is they build out of the current projects. So last year, we were at Gavindale High School, the Hostel of Hope, and trying to see what can we do within this space. And then from that engagement, we were able this year to get funding to start a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics program in that same school, which is going to be started from next year with the grade 10, grade 11, grade 12 learners. And this because we saw the literacy levels of those subjects were quite low. So you can see how it's evolving. Initially, when we went into that space, it was because of the hostel and revitalizing the hostel. And then from conversation, realizing we can actually get a science, technology, and engineering and maths program. And then now we're partnering with an NGO to implement this. And even with the ZDF, there's so much in the pipeline. There's a space across the school where they are now, where we're in partnership with the architecture department of how we can rethink that space. So you can see a lot of the projects in the HOC. We just don't have time to show everything, but they're constantly evolving. But I think from my side, and as I close, what I wanted to emphasize was it's built on a philosophy. It's built on philosophy, it's built on values, and we use that to hold ourselves accountable. And I think a good demonstration of that was myself and Oyama just now. We have to keep ourselves accountable. You know, we cannot come and say we know it all. Also, just to say, we are not saying the HOC is the be-all model for engagement. We're saying this is how we do it. And we're opening ourselves to be critiqued. And so, yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Clifford. Noluvo, if you want to share your brief response, go for it.
Okay, very brief. Dr. Damans, to answer your question, I think when I was listening to the science students that were presenting here, they mentioned how they would go about communicating their research to the community. And I loved their answer because one of them mentioned the conversations. And with that, to me, it shows that interdisciplinarity is something that is growing amongst the institution. Therefore, explaining, for an example, the calabash to a science student will not be a foreign adventure because already they understand that the community might not understand even the big words that they're using, and they are making an effort to actually use words that are actually applicable to the context within which the community operates. So I think the biggest thing here with all the theories that I mentioned, it's that the context matters. And so with my understanding of even the conversation is that within the science and the work that they are doing, the scientific work that they're doing, when they are submitting that to the conversations, they work with journalists there who understand the language, the common language of their people. And that relationship between the scientist and the journalist then produces an article that is understandable to the public. And so with that understanding that they have of being able to be flexible in their approach, I think then that opens an opportunity for us to even engage with where I'm coming from, because I'm also coming from an interdisciplinary background where my undergrad was in health science, then I went to business for my master's, then now I'm in education. And so that understanding, that disciplinarity, it helps us to be able to have these conversations and learn with and from one another. And Uputwamu, when he asked a very important question about Ubuyelembo, I think that we need to do what we can in the corners that we find ourselves in. And I say that because when I go to my grandmother's house, she still dishes for us in one dish. And we all eat from that dish. And from when we were little, and for that, it shows that you must be able to know the other person. You must be able to break bread with the other person. Uzawukwazi umuntu and the value of a person when you are gathering and eating from that dish. That is the little that she's doing in her corner, because generational-wise now we all play with our phones when having dinner. And so for her to uphold that, and she teaches us to also keep that in our own homes, that in that way we're able to teach also our kids, because before we are professors, before we are doctors, before we are everything, we are humans first. And I think once we start to understand, and once we have that mentality, even in the spaces that we find ourselves in, we are being practical in understanding umtu. You greet umtu, sawubona, molo. You are acknowledging that person as a human being. And I think those things that may seem very small and very little, they play a pivotal role in terms of us going back to Embo. Thank you.
Thanks, Nolovu. Oyama, you said you had a closing comment. If you can keep it to 30 seconds. Yeah.
Just briefly on my side as well, just to add, I was going to touch base on what you're saying, Noluvo, that, what we're learning as well is for us to have epistemic humility when doing this work as well. And what does it mean? It differs from each person. But I need to be vulnerable, I need to be agile, I need to love deeply for this work. I need to own it as well and not see it as a job that feeds Uzenaze at home, but see it as a purpose as well in serving my community. Also listening, for example, 2 days ago, one of our stakeholders just went to the office and barged in, and I was very busy and preparing for other things. I had to put everything down and listen, and think to myself, okay, how can we make the situation at least better for you in order to get this done? I don't have the powers, but in that little corner, what is it that is around me and the resources to make that program go ahead without any resources anyway, using what is available for us in the institution? So, thanks.
Thanks, I won't ask for a round of applause so that the conversation can continue into tea time. We have, it's 12:07, if we can all be back at 12:15. Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks, thanks Nuluvo.